"Sir, I can wake your daughter," said the homeless girl, leaving Big Shaq frozen at the roadside. For months Serena's silence swallowed every sound, every hope, until Raina spoke words that shattered the stillness. Now Big Shaq stands at a crossroads. Do the unimaginable to unravel betrayal, or lose his daughter to the darkness forever. The stakes are higher than privilege or pain, because some voices refuse to stay silent. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Not all angels wear wings. Some wear rags, and stare through you like they've seen your soul before. Big Shaq eased his black SUV to a stop at a red light, the late afternoon sun scattering gold across the glass facades of downtown Atlanta. He just wrapped up a charity event at a community center. Half a dozen kids had grinned ear to ear as he signed autographs and handed out basketballs. He felt good, genuine pride swelling in his chest. But tonight, something tugged at him, a nagging whisper in the back of his mind, telling him to pay attention. On the sidewalk ahead, halos of light caught on frayed strands of hair, swaying like dark tendrils in the breeze. A girl no older than 17 stood barefoot on the concrete. Her clothes were tattered, her eyes sharp and wild, as though every hardship she'd ever faced had crowned her soul with scars. She didn't beg for money or throw scraps at passing cars. She simply stared, seeming to pierce right to the man inside. For a moment the world slowed. Horns undone, city chatter muted. Only her presence remained. Shaq's breath caught when she pressed her face against the tinted window, reaching out as if to touch the barrier between them. He froze, pulse thudding. Her face felt familiar, though he'd never seen her. His heart unsettled by something he couldn't name. Then she spoke. No falter in her voice, just certainty. "Sir, I can wake your daughter." The words sliced through him, so simple, so imploring. Wake your daughter. He felt a shiver crawl up his spine, and instinctively he snapped his head to the rearview mirror. Serena, unconscious, unresponsive for more than 8 weeks. His only child, ensnared in a deep silence that no therapy, no medication had broken. The doctors called it selective mutism, a shutdown after she'd faced a wave of racial cruelty at her elite boarding academy. He knew grief when he saw it. He lived it daily in the stillness of her bedroom, the hum of machines that signaled life but no light. He turned back. The girl was still there, half hidden in shadow. The light shifted, revealing her features in more detail. A small scar above her eyebrow, fingers curled around a plastic cup, toes dirty as though she'd walked barefoot for miles. He wanted to roll down his window, to ask her what hell she meant, but he couldn't move. The light changed again, and when he looked back, she had vanished. The red light ended, and Shaq sighed, pressing the accelerator with purpose he didn't understand. As the SUV rejoined the flow of traffic, the echo of her voice lingered. "I can wake your daughter." It felt impossible. His mind flashed through every failed intervention. Therapists dragging him and his wife through endless sessions. Serena's body slack as she lay in bed, unblinking eyes glazed over in sorrow. Friends and family had begun to whisper that maybe it was time to accept it, that she'd lived through something too dark to ever speak of again. But this girl, this strange harbinger, she'd said it like a promise, not a question. Her voice had something of clarity, conviction, and an unshakable confidence that unsettled him more than despair ever had. He felt both terrified and drawn in by it. Shaq followed the route home, trying to chase away the image of her face, but her eyes haunted him. In the rearview mirror, he saw Serena lying on the back seat, head to the side, unmoving. He pressed a hand to her shoulder, half hoping for response, half afraid it would come. She remained still, as pale and distant as a statue. Something he understood only instinctively took root inside him. He would go back. He'd look for her, find out who she was, what she wanted, and why she thought she could wake Serena. Half the time he just sat in the driveway, heart pounding as he stared down at his daughter in silence, and yet he could not let the night release him from its grip. Hours later, when Serena slept, and the house was blanketed in quiet, he found himself changing into a hoodie, grabbing his keys, and heading back toward the alley. The girl might be gone for good, or she might still be there, waiting. He promised himself he would seek the truth. Even if that truth was a lie, he had to know. Rain fell lightly, the wet pavement gleaming under street lamps. The alley he approached teemed with shadows and trash bins, the smell of damp cardboard lingering. He stopped in the middle, listening. City hum surrounded him, but nothing moved. No girl, no flicker of her presence. He walked deeper, boots splashing in puddles, flashlight in hand, and for a moment, thought he heard a soft voice behind him. He spun but saw only an empty wall. His heart sank. He felt foolish in that moment. A millionaire, a public icon, and now hunting a ghost. He turned to leave, shoulders heavy with defeat, the smile he wore for cameras nowhere to be found. That's when she spoke again, colder this time, from the farthest reach of the alley. "You have to find me before she wakes." Her voice rolled off the brick walls, echoing like a challenge. Beard hair prickled on Shaq's neck. He swallowed, heart pounding with a mixture of dread and dawning hope. He didn't know where to begin, but he knew he could not leave, not without trying. Anything to get his Serena back. He pressed his palm to the wall, where the voice had been, damped grit on his fingers. He closed his eyes and thought, "Find her, before Serena wakes." The promise or the threat hung heavy in the night air. As he backed out of the alley, determined to chase this stranger into whatever darkness she beckoned. Grief doesn't knock when it comes back. It just walks in and sits on your chest. Shaquille O'Neal, known to the world as Big Shaq, a legend, a force of strength and charisma, moved like a ghost inside his own mansion. The house had always echoed with life, Serena's laughter dancing through the hallways, her sneakers squeaking against marble as she raced her brothers down the stairs. But now silence reigned. Not the peaceful kind, but the suffocating quiet that settled in homes touched by trauma. A silence thick enough to press down on your lungs and make you forget what joy used to sound like. Serena's room, tucked at the far end of the second floor, had become a shrine of what used to be posters of dance crews, trophies from regional competitions, a collection of journals stacked neatly beside her bed, all untouched for weeks. Her bed was still made with care, not because she used it, but because Lucille, Shaq's mother, refused to let the room fall into disorder. "She'll come back to us," she'd whisper each morning as she adjusted the pillows. And Shaq, standing at the door, would nod silently. He never said it out loud, but each day the hope inside him thinned like old glass. It started with the phone call. 2 months back, just after Serena had returned to campus following a summer trip with her father. She'd been happy, truly radiant, smiling in that soft, lopsided way she had when she was around people who made her feel safe. But within days, her spirit dimmed. Shaq had known something was wrong from the tone in her voice during their nightly FaceTime calls. Then came the night she didn't answer at all. No response. No message. The next morning, they found her alone in a closet at school, curled into herself like a child in a thunderstorm. She was conscious, but silent, conscious, but unreachable. Shaq flew in that same day. The school's principal, a man named Dr. Carlisle, gave a sanitized version of the events. There was a misunderstanding, an unfortunate prank. "We're investigating thoroughly," but Shaq saw through it. The walls of that school, polished and prestigious, hid ugliness under crisp uniforms and tradition. Serena hadn't just been pranked. She'd been targeted, harassed, isolated. Her silence was a scream no one had listened to. Back at home, the medical assessments began. Serena underwent dozens of tests, neurological scans, blood work, trauma evaluations. Nothing abnormal. Physically, she was healthy. But she didn't speak, didn't move without guidance. She sat in the same spot every day on her bedroom window bench, staring out at the backyard where she used to dance. Sometimes tears would slip down her cheeks, silent and endless. Other times she would close her eyes and hum, not songs, just faint vibrations like she was trying to remember how sound worked. Shaq tried everything. He brought in therapists from across the country, specialists in trauma, hypnotherapists, art therapists, even spiritual healers. They tried memory exercises, exposure therapy, scent recalls. They played her favorite songs. They asked her questions in every way they could, but Serena remained inside herself, locked. And Shaq, he played the part of the strong father, the man who could hold up the world. On talk shows he smiled. At charity events, he laughed. But when the lights dimmed and cameras went away, he would sit outside her door for hours, listening, hoping for any sound, any shift in breathing. A sign that she hadn't disappeared entirely. Lucille saw through the act. She knew grief when it lived in a man's bones. She'd seen it once in Shaq's eyes as a boy when his father left, and now again deeper, sharper. "You have to let her feel safe again," Lucille told him once. "She don't need fixing. She needs someone to remind her she ain't broken." Shaq wanted to believe that. But with each passing day, Serena faded more. There were moments when she flinched at certain sounds. The chime of a school bell on TV. The soft click of heels on tile. Sometimes she gripped her arms tightly, like she was bracing for impact. And worst of all, she'd started to mouth words silently, in her sleep. Words Shaq couldn't understand. Words that made her fists clench in dread. Shawnee, Shaq's ex-wife, had flown in from LA to help. She stayed 3 weeks, then returned when the silence became too heavy for her to bear. "I can't sit here and watch her disappear," she confessed on the night before she left. "She's slipping, Shaq. And I don't know how to hold her." Shaq didn't respond. He just walked her to the door, gave her a long hug, and stood in the hallway long after she drove away. That night, he fell asleep on Serena's bedroom floor, holding the music box she'd loved as a child. It hadn't played in years, but when he wound it and let it sing, Serena blinked. A slow, uncertain movement. And he dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, something inside her still listened. The next morning, she returned to stillness, and Shaq returned to the world. Community appearances, fundraisers, coaching young athletes at the rec center. He kept his calendar full because time spent away from the house felt like time spent away from his own failure. He donated more, spoke more, laughed harder, and yet the image of Serena on that bench followed him like a ghost. When people hugged him, their hands patted his back like it could reach the place he was hurting. But none of them could touch that space. Not really. One morning, as he sipped his coffee and scrolled through messages from his foundation team, he paused at a line from a handwritten letter a young girl sent. It read, "Sometimes you need a stranger to show you the way home, 'cause the people who love you too much can't see the way out." He stared at that for a long time. Later that day, when he drove downtown and stopped at that red light, the one where he first saw Raina, those words returned to him. The girl's face, her quiet, chilling certainty. "Sir, I can wake your daughter." He hadn't told anyone about that moment. Not Lucille, not Shawnee. It felt too strange, too impossible to explain. But now it clung to him like a thread he couldn't unpull. Was there something deeper in what the girl had said? Was it intuition, a lie, or a cry from someone who knew pain intimately, enough to recognize it in Serena? As the evening sun dipped behind the horizon, and the house fell into hushed tones again, Shaq stood outside Serena's door. He didn't enter, just leaned his forehead against the wood, and whispered, "I'll find her. I don't know who she is, or how she knows, but I'll find her." Serena didn't respond, but the air shifted. Downstairs in the kitchen, Lucille stirred her tea slowly. She looked toward the ceiling and whispered, "Let her be real." In the shadows outside the window, a streetlight flickered twice. Then, when a stranger knows your secrets, you stop wondering how and start asking why. It was just after 7 in the morning, when the intercom at the front gate buzzed, slicing through the quiet of Shaq's estate like a blade. He had been nursing his second cup of coffee, standing barefoot in the kitchen, eyes fixed on the garden Serena once danced in. The early sunlight poured through the windows, soft and golden, but it didn't warm him. Nothing had in weeks. When the buzz came again, urgent and deliberate, he blinked, glanced at the screen mounted on the wall, and froze. She was back. The girl from the alley. Shaq stared at the grainy image. The same tangled hair, the oversized army jacket. But now, he saw her more clearly, alert, waiting, hands folded like she knew he'd be watching. His finger hovered over the intercom, hesitation burning in his chest. Then he pressed it. "You again?" he asked, voice low. She leaned toward the camera, and with chilling precision said, "Big Shaq, your mother's name is Lucille. Your daughter, Serena, used to write poems about birds who couldn't fly." Shaq's stomach dropped. "How do you know that?" he demanded. But she was already looking up at the lens, unshaken. "You have to let me in," she said. "You have to let me try." Shaq didn't respond. He walked slowly to the door, muscles tight, mind racing. He had told no one about the bird poems, not even Serena's therapists. They were written in a little leather notebook, tucked in the back of her bookshelf, pages filled with metaphors about cages and clipped wings and skies too far to reach. He hadn't looked at them in years. Now a stranger was quoting them like scripture. At the door, Lucille appeared behind him, her expression wary. "Who is it?" "That girl," Shaq murmured. "From the alley." "The same one." Lucille's face tightened. "What'd she want?" "She knows things," Shaq said without looking at her. "Things she shouldn't." They stood in silence a moment before Lucille gave a slow, reluctant nod. Shaq opened the door. The girl stood at the bottom of the steps. Calm, eyes locked onto his like she'd known him forever. Her clothes were dirtier now. Her fingernails chipped, and there was a fresh scrape across her chin. Still, she didn't flinch when he stepped toward her. "I don't know who you are," Shaq said evenly, "but you're gonna tell me exactly how you know about Serena." "I told you," she replied, voice soft but firm. "I can wake her." "That's not an answer." She tilted her head slightly. "You're not ready for the real one yet." Shaq felt the burn of frustration rising, but held it down. "Start talking." "I dream what other people feel," she said. "I don't know why. I don't control it. But when I get close to someone who's broken, like, split open inside, it's like a mirror cracks in my sleep, and their pieces show up. Serena's pieces showed up 3 nights before I ever saw your face." Shaq narrowed his eyes. "That's insane." "Maybe." The girl shrugged. "But I saw her, in the dark, in a locker, crying into her knees while voices laughed outside. One of them called her a diversity token. Another said she'd be prettier if she was less ethnic." Her voice didn't shake, but her hands clenched slightly. Shaq's jaw tightened. "Who told you those words?" "No one," she said. "I heard them. Inside the dream." Lucille stepped closer, disbelief and caution wrestling on her face. "Who are you?" "My name's Raina," she said quietly. "I don't have a last name that matters. Not anymore." Shaq exhaled slowly, tension pounding behind his eyes. He didn't believe in magic. He didn't even believe in therapy the way the doctors practiced it. But he believed in pain. And this girl wore pain like armor. Old, dented, but functional. It was in her posture, in the quiet certainty of her voice. She had seen things. Maybe even things like what Serena had endured. "You get 5 minutes," Shaq said finally. "But if I don't like what I hear, I'll leave," Raina nodded. "No question." He led her through the house, down a hallway lined with family photos. Raina glanced at them briefly. Serena grinning in a graduation cap. Shaq on the cover of a sports magazine. Lucille surrounded by grandkids. She didn't say a word, but something softened in her face. When they reached Serena's room, Raina didn't hesitate. She walked in like she belonged there, like she'd been there before in another lifetime. Serena sat on the bench, as always unmoving. Her eyes flicked once to the door, then drifted back to the trees outside. Raina didn't speak. She walked over slowly and sat cross-legged on the floor beside Serena, keeping just enough distance. She didn't reach out, didn't touch her. Instead, she pulled something from her coat pocket, a small cracked piece of blue glass. "I found this in a church shelter," she said softly, almost to herself. "It was buried in a box of baby shoes. It reminds me of sky. Not real sky. Sky in dreams." Serena didn't move. Raina placed the glass on the floor between them and closed her eyes. "If you can hear me," she whispered, "I'm sorry for what they did to you. I'm sorry nobody heard you scream. But you're not invisible to me. I saw you. I still see you." Shaq watched from the doorway, his breath shallow. Lucille stood beside him, clutching her cross necklace, lips moving in silent prayer. Raina opened her eyes. Her face was pale, but steady. She turned to Shaq and spoke carefully. "She's in there, but she's stuck in a loop. A memory loop. It's like she's reliving that day, over and over. I can feel the fear she felt, the humiliation, the loneliness. But the worst part isn't what they did to her. It's that someone she trusted let it happen." Shaq stepped into the room, his voice rough. "Who?" "I don't know yet," Raina said. "But it wasn't just strangers. Someone close. Someone who was supposed to protect her." Shaq felt the walls close in. He thought of Serena's best friend, of the boy who used to call her his twin flame. Could it be him? "I want to try something," Raina said. "But you have to trust me, just once." Shaq looked at Serena, still unmoving, still silent. Then he looked at Raina, this girl who had wandered out of nowhere, with truth that cut deeper than most people dared. He didn't know if he believed in her power, but he believed in the way she looked at his daughter, with no pity, no fear, just recognition. He nodded. "Try," he said. "Do whatever you need. Some gifts feel like curses, until you see what they can undo." Raina sat beside Serena again, the next morning. The same floor, the same cracked piece of blue glass resting between them. Sunlight angled across the hardwood, brushing faint golden strokes across Serena's cheek. She didn't move, didn't blink, just sat in the same fragile stillness, her eyes fixed beyond the trees. But something about her felt different this time. Less like stone, more like a mirror wrapped in fog. Shaq leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, posture tight with anticipation and doubt. He hadn't slept. He'd spent the night pacing the house, checking the security cams twice, replaying Reina's words in his mind. This stranger had appeared from nowhere, spewing visions and secrets, and now she was sitting across from his daughter like she'd always belonged. Lucille stood behind him, eyes locked on Reina, whispering under her breath like she was blessing the girl without knowing why. Lord, let this be more than madness. Let it be mercy. Reina spoke softly. I need to hold her hand. Shaq's voice cracked with tension. Why? Because connection doesn't work from far away, Reina replied without looking at him. I have to anchor to her, skin to skin. Lucille stepped forward. What happens when you do? I close my eyes, Reina said. And if her mind lets me in, I listen. To what? To the places that hurt, she said. The ones people bury because they can't survive remembering. Shaq hesitated. Everything in him screamed not to let a stranger touch his child, especially one who claimed she could climb through memories like staircases. But logic had stopped serving them weeks ago. Serena hadn't moved in 64 days. Doctors, specialists, therapists, none had reached her. Shaq gave a reluctant nod. Do it. Reina reached forward gently and slipped her fingers over Serena's. Her hand was light, respectful, not probing. Serena's skin was cool, but warm enough to remind Reina that this was still a living girl, still holding on. Reina closed her eyes. Her breath slowed. Her lips moved silently, as if reciting names in a forgotten language. Then her hand twitched barely, but enough. Shaq straightened. The room seemed to contract, like sound itself was pulling back. A pressure built around them, not dangerous but charged, like the air before a storm. And then Reina whispered one word. Locker. Serena flinched. Not a spasm, not a twitch mistaken for coincidence. A deliberate flinch, like her mind had recoiled from the word. Shaq stumbled forward, nearly tripping on the rug, his heart slamming against his chest. She moved. Lucille gasped. She moved. Reina's eyes were still closed, face pale, sweat beginning to form along her temple. Her fingers tightened slightly around Serena's. She spoke again, this time slower, like narrating something only she could see. There's a locker, she murmured. Gray. Number 11-7. Cold metal. Someone's pushing her in. 3 voices laughing. 2 boys. 1 girl. They're calling her names. Nasty ones. About her skin. Her voice. Her dance team. One of them says, you think you're special 'cause your dad's Big Shaq? And then they shut the door. Hard. It's dark. And she's small again. Just a girl who trusted too many smiles. Shaq's breath caught. He took a step closer. Who were they? Reina's brow furrowed. She knew one of them. Knew him well. Someone she trusted. Reese. His name is Reese. Lucille swore under her breath. That Langdon boy. That little rich snake. Reina's fingers jerked, then released. Her eyes snapped open. She blinked several times before turning to Shaq. She's trapped in that day, Reina said. Every minute of it. It's not just the moment they locked her in. It's the moments after when no one came. When she cried for help and the silence answered. That silence grew inside her. It's still growing. Shaq's knees buckled, and he sank into the armchair behind him. Jesus. She doesn't believe anyone will listen, Reina continued. Not anymore. Not after what Reese did. Not after the staff ignored the bruises. Shaq looked at Serena. Her fingers had returned to stillness, but her eyelids flickered now and then like someone dreaming too loud to stay asleep. For the first time in 2 months, she wasn't a statue. She was a storm cloud waiting to crack. I didn't go all the way in, Reina said. I barely touched the surface. But I need time. If I can stay connected longer, I can find the place where she's still herself. Lucille touched her arm. What does that mean? It means she's buried the good memories to survive the bad ones, Reina said. If I can bring one of them forward, it might break the loop. Shaq looked up, face drawn but focused. What do you need? Reina stood slowly, legs shaking slightly from exertion. I need to sleep here tonight, somewhere close, somewhere I can stay connected to her aura while I rest. Dreams are how I enter. But the space matters. Energy matters. Lucille didn't even wait. She can stay in the guest room across the hall. I'll make it ready. Shaq rubbed his face, his massive hands trembling. If this works, if you can do this. Raina met his eyes. I don't do miracles. I just listen to pain no one else wants to hear. That night, while the house grew dark and quiet, Raina lay on the guest bed, a notebook on her chest. She scribbled memories of her own before sleep took her. Images of church basements, cold tile floors, and girls who didn't come back from quiet places. Then she closed her eyes. In the stillness of midnight, Serena stirred again, just a fraction. But her lips parted like she was trying to say something. And from the other room, Raina whispered into the dark. I hear you. Privilege doesn't hide guilt. It dresses it in blazers and lawyers. Shaq started the next morning at dawn, eyes bloodshot, chest tight. He drove through manicured streets to the gates of Belmont Preparatory, the elite boarding school, where Serena had fallen silent. The towering brick walls and iron gates gleamed as though untouched by guilt, though Shaq felt its weight in every polished window pane. He parked outside and stepped onto the campus, feeling both familiar and foreign, like he was intruding on a world that had thrived in silence while his daughter suffered. He checked in at the front office, flashing his credentials from the foundation he'd set up, the one he hoped could someday protect kids like Serena. But the receptionist gave a tight-lipped smile and directed him to the headmaster's office without apology or empathy. Dr. Carlyle, older graying at the temples, welcomed Shaq in a veneer of calm professionalism. Carlyle insisted he had the school's full cooperation. Surveillance cameras, records, witness statements. It was all under review. But Shaq noticed a tremor in the man's face. Tiny, almost imperceptible. A whisper of fear. And he saw the binders lined up neatly on the desk like soldiers, each one waiting to lock secrets inside forever. Shaq's voice remained measured as he asked for the security footage from the day Serena was found. Carlyle's face stiffened. I'm afraid much of it is missing, Carlyle began. There were technical malfunctions during the late evening hours. We've reported it to the board. We're investigating scheduling conflicts. He forced a reassuring smile, an apology bottled in white noise. Shaq's grip tightened, and he exhaled slowly. I want every frame from 7 p.m. to midnight, including adjacent hallways. We'll do our best, Carlyle said, his fingers tapping. But some cameras were down. Years under media scrutiny and crisis negotiation had taught Shaq how watered-down apologies were offered by those in power. He left without promise. Out in the front yard, he saw a white van parked discreetly nearby. A janitor in a high-visibility vest lingered by the maintenance shed. Shaq watched him retreat when their eyes met, shoulders slumped with defeat. The man's face, kind eyes and a worn face, looked familiar. He reminded Shaq of service workers who cared enough to stay invisible. Later they identified him as Mr. Hawthorne. He had been the only one to check the closet where Serena was locked. During evening coffee with Lucille, Shaq played the video his private investigator had harvested from a hidden angle. The hallway cam, just outside the janitor's closet. I don't know how they missed it, said the PI. But here, on screen, 3 shadows appeared. 2 male, 1 female. Voices carried through even without audio. Words like token, shut up, fake. The girl, Serena, had begged, silently, as they shoved her inside. The door slams. A long minute passes with no movement. Then Miss Hawthorne's figure appears, pushing the door open, helping Serena stand, comfortingly brushing hair from her face. Then he disappears. Shaq's fist slammed the table. Lucille flinched. He played the footage again. He tried, Shaq murmured. He tried, and he got fired. The PI nodded, face taut. They said he mocked staff protocols, put Serena at risk. But we checked. No record of unusual procedure. No complaint. They just called it a policy violation. Clean cut. Removed from campus quietly. Privilege had its methods. Your brand, your privilege, your reputation. No matter how you trashed them. And Shaq felt his daughter's spirit watching him fight this alone. The next day, he went to the maintenance office and found Mr. Hawthorne. The man was packing up a box, his shoulders heavy. He looked up, startled. Shaq introduced himself. I saw what you did, Shaq said. You helped her. They fired you. Hawthorne's eyes reddened. He nodded. She was just a kid. She was in there for 20 minutes, panicking. Did you report what you saw? Hawthorne hesitated. I did. To the assistant dean. She told me she would handle it. 2 days later, they told me to leave. No explanation. Shaq placed a hand on the man's arm. You did the right thing. He offered legal support and a settlement. But Hawthorne refused. I just want justice for the girl, he said. Shaq walked out with more fire in his gut than he'd felt in months. He had the footage. He had the whistleblower. He had the detail that drove a wedge under privilege's door. Belmont might have thought they could bury it, but he dug it up. Yet as he prepared to go public, Raina's warning echoed in his mind. Not yet. She'd been quiet in the last 2 days. Withdrawn. Raina said that Serena's recovery wasn't ready for public spectacle. That right now, they weren't building case files. They were untangling trauma. Shaq conflicted himself. His father instinct screamed to blow the lid wide open, but his heart told him to listen, to trust this strange girl's instincts. That night, Raina came to him in the kitchen. The house smelled of midnight jasmine from the garden. He laid out the footage on his phone and replayed the scene for her. She watched it intently, stance rigid, eyes thoughtful. This is real. This proves they treated her like she was invisible, Shaq said. Raina nodded slowly, face impassive. Yes. Shaq met her gaze. We go public. We show this. School shuts down. Board resigns. They're forced to answer. Raina lifted a finger. You'll get that. But not now. If you go now, you trap Serena in her shame again. You trap her in watching her worst moment replayed on screens, in debates, in speeches half filled with sympathetic stares. She shook her head. She's not ready. Not the way she should be. Shaq's chest tightened. Then when? After she wakes. After she speaks. After you can hold her hand while the world listens. You get to that moment first. Shaq stared at Raina's eyes. She bore the weight of her past, like armor. Like she learned when to strike first, when to wait. And he realized how thin the line was between justice and exposure. Between healing and harm. He nodded solemnly. We wait, but we prepare. She smiled then, small, almost sad. That's the right answer. The next morning, late-breaking news flashed on his phone. A rival school had already issued a statement condemning Belmont. A national congresswoman asked for an inquiry. The public outcry had begun. Without him, privileged jerking awake, looking around too late. They were talking about it, but no mention of Serena, no mention of eyewitnesses, no victim story, no soul behind the scandal. Shaq realized then that he didn't need to rush. A storm was already gathering. He turned off the screen. With Rena's help, they would wait until Serena spoke, looked them in the eye, and told them herself. Then the story would be true, not just viral. He looked to Raina and Lucille. Both had quiet determination carved into their faces. Then he breathed long and easy, dangerous, but powerful. They would pull this secret out of its tomb. When the time was right, and no matter how long that took, they would give Serena back, her voice on her terms. She didn't want to be found. People who live on the edge rarely do. The first real rain in weeks rolled through Atlanta like a quiet reminder. The skies were low and gray, the clouds sagging heavy with grief they'd been holding back for too long. The sound of the rain tapping against the windows matched the rhythm of the silence inside Shaq's home, broken only by the occasional clink of silverware or shuffle of socks against wood. That morning, Serena had blinked 3 times and shifted slightly on the window bench. A victory, if measured by the slow, aching steps of healing. Shaq stood by the kitchen island, brewing coffee for Raina. She hadn't asked for it, but he noticed she always smelled the cup he carried before bed, even if she never drank it. Something about warmth, maybe. He poured 2 mugs, one for him, one for her. Then he stepped into the guest room hallway and knocked gently. Raina answered the door slowly, dressed in a borrowed hoodie and old jeans. Her hair was damp, her expression unreadable. She stepped aside wordlessly and let him in. The room was minimal. She hadn't touched the drawers or used the full-sized bed properly. Instead, she'd been sleeping curled up in the corner armchair, like she never expected to stay long. Shaq handed her the coffee. She took it this time, wrapping her fingers around the mug with quiet appreciation. He sat across from her, waiting. He didn't press, didn't pry. He just waited in the space with her, offering time like most people offer advice. Raina spoke first. I never told anyone the full story, because when I did before, they either tried to fix me or call me crazy. Shaq nodded. Slow, You don't have to explain anything you don't want to. She exhaled through her nose. I kind of do now. You let me into your daughter's mind. You deserve to know what I've been running from. Shaq didn't interrupt. He sipped his coffee and let her begin. I was born in West Monroe, Louisiana. My mother was white. My father was who knows. She wouldn't say. Her family cut her off when she kept me. We bounced between church shelters and halfway homes until I was 6. Then she vanished, left me at a shelter and never came back. Shaq clenched his jaw slightly, but said nothing. They put me in a religious juvenile program, called it a reform center for troubled girls. But it wasn't reform. It was punishment for being different. Most of the girls were like me, mixed, poor, forgotten. The staff used scripture like a scalpel, told us we were impure, that our pain was a symptom of sin. They gave us meds, quiet pills, dream erasers. We were told the visions were demonic. Shaq's hand tightened around his mug. I started seeing the dreams when I was around 9, Raina continued, her voice calm, detached. At first I thought they were just mine, nightmares I couldn't escape. But then they got more specific, detailed, things I didn't know, but later saw were real. I told one of the counselors once. She said I was possessed. They strapped me down and locked me in the solitude chamber for 2 nights straight. I learned after that not to speak. She looked out the window, eyes distant. But the dreams got stronger. I began to see things from the girls around me. One girl, I'll never forget her name. Jordana. She was 10. They said she acted out, but I saw what happened. I dreamed it. Her uncle used to visit on Sundays and take her out of the compound. He did things, then brought her back with candy and told the nuns she was just sensitive. Shaq's fists balled now, his voice low. What did you do? I told her I knew, Raina said. She cried for a full day. Then the next morning she ran. Got caught by security. That night she was gone. Transferred to a stricter program. We never saw her again. Shaq felt a coldness spread across his chest. I left the year I turned 12, she said. Snuck out during a kitchen fire. Climbed through the laundry duct and walked 4 miles barefoot. I'd stashed some food in a mop bucket 2 weeks earlier, just in case. That was the last time I saw that place. She looked at Shaq then, face blank but eyes alive. Since then I've been on the street, mostly. Sometimes shelters. Sometimes with truckers who didn't ask questions. A vet named Nell found me once. She runs an underground shelter for women like me. She helped me understand my mind wasn't broken, just wired differently. Shaq's breath was low and slow. And the dreams? They're still there, Raina nodded. Stronger now. I don't always get to choose when they come. But when they do, I've learned how to read them. The more I understand pain, the more clearly I see others. Serena's loop was familiar. It mirrored one. I had one. I knew how to reach her, because I used to be her. Shaq stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the gray drizzle touching the garden Serena once danced through. His voice was soft. I've seen injustice, grew up in it. But this is deeper than I've ever let myself imagine. Raina didn't respond. She didn't need to. He turned to her. You should have never had to carry all this. You were a child. We all were, she said. Shaq looked at her with new eyes, like someone seeing past the label of homeless girl into the web of horrors she'd survived. And yet, she stood, resilient, gifted, unclaimed by the trauma that tried to erase her. You don't owe anyone your story, he said after a long pause. But thank you for trusting me with it. Raina smiled for the first time. Not a full one. Just a corner pull. You didn't ask for it. That's why I gave it. He nodded. You still have a place here, whatever you need. She looked towards Serena's room. I just need time. And quiet. The next dive's gonna be deeper. I want to bring her out. Fully. Shaq stepped closer and extended his hand. She took it. Raina, he said softly. You're not just helping my daughter. You're teaching me what pain really means. And what it really takes to heal. Raina swallowed, but held his gaze. Then let's not waste it. Truth doesn't just hide underground. Sometimes it's buried alive. Before dawn broke over Atlanta, Shaq steered his SUV down a narrow gravel road that sloped away from the manicured suburbs into an area that felt worlds apart. Raina sat silently in the passenger seat, her profile outlined by dashboard light, eyes fixed on the path ahead. The road twisted through overgrown trees, roadside wildflowers struggling to grow in damp earth. casting damp shadows that deepened awareness. This was no ordinary drive. It was a journey into a hidden layer of the city, one few ever knew existed. They reached a rusted gate, unmarked except for the letters UVC scrawled in peeling paint. Underground Victims Collective, Reina's whispered introduction. Inside, a low building crouched beneath the trees, green roof blending into foliage. Shaq parked, and they walked up a narrow walkway. Hot, humid air carried whispers from within, laughter, tears, murmured conversations. It smelled of coffee and antiseptic, and hope. They entered a common room that was both lived in and orderly. Worn couches, mismatched chairs in a circle, a kitchenette with warm light emanating from under the cabinets. A group of men and women sat waiting, some in wheelchairs, others wearing tattoos from deployments overseas. A large corkboard on the back wall was dotted with Polaroid photos of people, survivors mostly, some smiling, some looking reflective. The notes beneath each photo had names and gratitude. He heard me when no one else did. I slept again. Shaq's breath caught. Beneath the surface of city life, he saw the faces of suffering, faces he'd never seen before. Reina led him to a woman in her late 40s, dressed in faded camouflage pants and a simple cotton shirt, hair buzzed short. She had shoulders squared like she'd carried more than her share, and eyes sharp like desert sun. She stood and extended her hand. "Shaquille O'Neal," she said, voice gravel-rich. "Call me Nell." Shaq shook it. "Reina's told me about you." Nell nodded. "And I about her, and the work she's done. She saved people I thought were lost." Shaq searched her face. "I need you to tell me why I'm here." Nell gestured to the chairs. "Then sit down, she'll explain." Reina sat next to Nell. "This is where people who survive trauma go to find their voice," she said quietly. "Not just therapy. This is peer-led, safe, sometimes unconventional, but it works." One by one, vets and former social workers stood to share brief stories of how Reina had connected to their pain, without words, without judgment. One man recounted nightmares that stopped after Reina's empathic sessions. Another spoke of PTSD, which loosened after she sat in silence with him and listened until his breathing regulated. Shaq felt the room shift, filled with tension and release, collective memory of darkness shared and reframed in trust. Nell leaned in toward him. "She's not just gifted, she's trained. We guided her, protected her. She comes in, we prep rooms, we moderate sessions. But the real work, that's in her mind." Shaq listened, heart thundering. His daughter, his Serena, needed that kind of understanding. He looked at Reina, illuminated by a single overhead bulb. She didn't flinch. She had the strength of someone scarred but steadfast. "You helped me once," one veteran named Carlos told Shaq. "Helped me dream of my kids again, after a year of frozen nights. She doesn't need testing. You saw what happened with your daughter." His tone wasn't asking for approval. It was stating truth. Shaq felt tears sting his eyes. He nodded to Carlos. Peace trembled in that gesture. Acknowledgement of shared suffering, a reluctant humility from the man who had once towered over stadiums. Reina turned back to him. "I can help Serena here, because she belongs here too for now. With people who won't pity her but respect her, with space and time to feel." "And then?" Shaq asked. "What comes next?" She looked at Nell, who answered softly. "Right now, breathing, talking on her own time, feeling safe enough to feel again." Shaq exhaled. He remembered Serena's empty bench at home. He remembered being taught that strength came in silence, delivering speeches to crowds while his daughter couldn't even whisper at home. Here, he realized, strength could be reborn in quiet by slow, deliberate steps taken in felt safety. They walked through the facility. A quiet room with art supplies, another with dimmed lights and plush pillows. Sensory rooms where survivors could exist without expectation. A small garden outside, where people tended herbs and vegetables, nurturing life as a counterpoint to trauma. Shaq's heart tightened to see that at every turn, respect had been built into the design. Back in the main room, Reina took his hand, this time with intentional warmth. "I don't think Serena needs cameras or headlines. She needs breathing room." Her eyes met his. "She needs anchors, like everyone here." Shaq considered it. He'd been preparing a legal and PR assault. But this was real healing. He swallowed. "Okay, we'll do this." Reina's expression softened, gratitude settling across her features. "I don't ask others for help, but she needs all of us." Lucille joined them, unannounced, her presence quiet but powerful. She stood beside Shaq, said, "I've raised a giant, but this demands something different." She looked at Raina. "Thank you." Nell nodded. "Thank you for trusting us." Outside, clouds parted, and sunlight spilled into the room. Shaq closed his eyes, breathing in the weight of the moment, the turning point in his daughter's recovery. He finally saw how healing could happen underground, away from cameras and spotlight and noise. They left quietly, as the survivors resumed their shared silence, an unspoken pact of respect. Raina walked alongside Shaq, her pace measured. On the drive home, Shaq realized this shelter wasn't just healing trauma. It was reshaping his definition of strength, compassion, and patience. Serena's journey wouldn't be televised. It would be lived breath by breath, unrushed and unembellished. He glanced at Raina. "When do we start?" She gave him a soft but steady smile. "Tonight, I'll bring her here." Shaq nodded. He looked ahead at the road home. The next chapter beneath brighter skies, built on the foundation of soft, underground truths. A single word can sound louder than thunder when you've waited months to hear it. The air inside the shelter that night was electric with stillness, the kind that felt like the world had paused to listen. Shaq stood near the far wall of the sensory room, arms folded tightly, his towering frame uncharacteristically tense. The room was lit only by soft amber bulbs, strung from the ceiling, casting a warm, womb-like glow that settled the mind. Outside, cicadas pulsed in rhythmic waves. Inside, a silence deeper than sleep waited to be broken. Serena sat cross-legged on the padded mat, her eyes open but unfocused. Her body leaned slightly forward, not quite present but not fully gone. Shaq had seen her like this before, somewhere in the space between withdrawal and awareness. He feared it. It always looked like she was on the edge of drowning, still and silent, just beneath the surface. Raina knelt, across from her, calm, steady, her breathing in sync with Serena's. The room had been prepped carefully, soft music playing, lavender oil diffusing through the vents, temperature adjusted just right. Everything had to feel safe, grounded. Raina said that the deeper the dive, the more delicate the environment needed to be. Nell stood by the doorway, her hands folded. She'd watched this process before, and though she trusted Raina's gift, even she knew there were no guarantees. Each session was like stepping into the abyss and hoping the fall ended with light. Shaq looked at Lucille, who stood near the door. She gave him a small, strong nod. Then they both turned to Raina, who reached out and gently took Serena's hands. "I'm going in deeper this time," Raina had warned earlier. "Deeper than ever before. There's a cost. It'll pull something from both of us. But it has to be done." Now, with Serena's fingers curled inside hers, Raina closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Raina's breathing changed. Slowed. Deepened. Her head tilted back slightly, like she was listening to something far away. Shaq watched, heart hammering. Raina's shoulders began to tremble, lightly, rhythmically. Sweat gathered along her brow. Her lips parted, moving soundlessly. Inside her mind, the world had shifted. She was back in that locker, the scent of metal and sweat thick in her nostrils. Her knees pressed against Serena's fear. The cold dark pressed into her bones. And voices, distant, echoing. "Why'd you even come here? They only picked you 'cause of your skin. Daddy can't save you now." The pain wasn't sharp. It was dull and heavy, like grief that had been swallowed whole. Raina reached out within the memory, calling Serena's name, not with words but with presence. She pulled images of joy, of softness, of childhood moments Serena had almost forgotten. Dancing barefoot in the yard, blowing bubbles with Shaq on a summer morning, painting sunflowers with her mom at the kitchen table. These weren't just distractions, they were lifelines. Outside the dreamscape, Serena's lips twitched. Raina leaned in closer, whispering something that sounded like wind moving through tall grass. Then Serena flinched. Her fingers curled. Her body jolted once, as if shocked. Raina's breath hitched. Her eyes shot open, glowing with tears. She looked at Serena, and then it happened. Serena gasped. Her whole body shuddered like it had been yanked from underwater. Her mouth opened, lips dry, and her throat scratched out a single trembling word. "Reese." The room froze. Shaq's heart stopped. "Reese," she said again, clearer this time, with more weight. Her voice cracked halfway through it, but it was unmistakable. The first word in months, the first breach in her silence. Lucille pressed her hands to her mouth. Shaq knelt immediately beside her, stunned, eyes brimming. Baby girl. But Serena didn't look at him. Her eyes locked on Reyna, desperate and frightened. He said he'd stop them. He promised, she whispered, as if the memory had just torn through her chest. Shaq's body stiffened, not from the shock of speech, but from the revelation inside it. Reese, not just one of the bullies, not just a bystander. He was supposed to be Serena's protector, her best friend, her other half as she used to call him. They'd danced together, studied together, spent entire summers side by side. He hadn't just failed her, he'd betrayed her. Reyna reached out and touched Serena's cheek. You don't have to carry that alone anymore. Serena nodded weakly, her shoulders trembling. A tear slid down her face, but it didn't look like sorrow. It looked like release. Shaq wrapped his arms around her gently. For the first time in months, she leaned into him. Her weight melted into his chest, and he felt something inside him fracture and heal all at once. Lucille came forward and rested her hand on Serena's back, whispering, "Thank you, God, thank you." Nell stepped quietly out of the room to give them space, her face unreadable but calm. Serena stayed in Shaq's arms for a long time. No one rushed her. Reyna sat quietly nearby, drained but composed. Her skin pale, her energy low, but her eyes still strong. Later, when they asked how she found the moment, Reyna said, she was already screaming it. She just needed someone who could hear her inside the silence. Shaq carried Serena to the car that night. She didn't fall back into stillness, but stayed awake the whole ride, her head resting against his shoulder. She didn't speak again, not yet, but the one word had cracked the wall. It had said everything. Back home, Shaq sat beside her bed as she slept peacefully, without twitching, without fear. He stepped into the hallway, where Reyna was waiting. You knew it would be him? He asked. I knew she was hurt most by someone she trusted, Reyna said. But it wasn't my truth to name. Shaq nodded slowly. Now it's hers. Reyna met his eyes. And she's taking it back. One word at a time. Sometimes it's not the monster who breaks you. It's the friend who turns away. Shaq felt his heart sink as he stepped into the expansive foyer of the Langdon residence in Buckhead. The home reflected old money elegance, marble floors, tall ceilings, oil paintings of paternal forebears in gilded frames. As he followed the butler through quiet corridors, he carried a weight heavier than the Gucci suit he wore. The knowledge that inside these walls lived a boy who once called Serena his twin flame, and who had shattered her world. Reese Langdon, 17, sat on an antique chaise in a sunroom overlooking manicured gardens. He looked different from Shaq's memory, thinner, anxious, guilt etched into the lines around his eyes. He stood up with obvious hesitation when Shaq entered. Mr. O'Neill, Reese managed, voice trembling. I didn't expect you. Shaq didn't respond at first. He studied the youth before him, a boy molded by privilege, raised on promises that money could fix anything, yet now plainly broken himself. He gestured toward a seat. We need to talk about Serena. Reese swallowed hard, lowering himself gingerly into the seat. I know, he whispered. Shaq exhaled slowly. She said your name. The first word she spoke in months. Reese closed his eyes. Pain flickered across his face. And never meant. I didn't want it to go that far. Shaq leaned forward. You were at her locker. You watched them push her in. You didn't stop it. Reese looked away. His voice cracked. I was scared. They threatened to make my life hell. I thought if I stayed quiet it'd stop. He swallowed again. Her silence was sleeping. Mine has been screaming ever since. Shaq studied him. The confession was small but seismic. He pulled out his phone. You know I'm recording this. He pressed play. Reese's words played back, raw and trembling. Reese flinched. Yeah. Silence draped the room. Finally, Shaq spoke again. Your father covered it up, didn't he? Reese's face crumpled. He said it was a misunderstanding. They said it was closed. They pulled footage, sent witnesses. He said he'd handle it, so I trusted him. I didn't realize how deep it was until Serena didn't wake. Shaq's chest felt tight. Betrayal from one you loved cuts differently. Your silence cost her voice, Reese. Reese's shoulders shook. He covered his face. I hate who I became. Shaq nodded slowly. It's not just about you anymore. It's about making it right. Reese looked up, eyes red. What do you want me to do? Shaq stared at him for a moment that stretched too long. Tell the truth. All of it. Publicly. And help Serena find her voice again. Reese stood abruptly. There's no going public. My father, he'll unleash legal hell. He'll ruin your reputation. He'll destroy me. Shaq met his gaze. So what? You'd rather protect the man who destroyed your friend instead of making things right. Reese's eyes flicked down. I don't know. Shaq's tone sharpened. Here's what you don't get. This isn't just about consequences. It's about accountability. Your father used power to bury a crime. You, by staying silent, you became part of the crime. He paused. I won't let my daughter's life be silenced for your convenience. Reese shook his head in defeat. I'm sorry. Shaq stood, walked toward the door. Your apology means nothing without action, but I'm giving you one chance. You want to help Serena wake fully? You go on record. You tell your father you're doing it, or I'll do it for you. Reese's jaw clenched. Tears formed. His voice broke. I'll think about it. Shaq opened the door to leave. Then he paused and said, one more thing. Thank you. For telling me the truth at least. That's where healing starts. Reese stood frozen as Shaq exited. The door clicked shut behind him. Outside in the car, Shaq sank into the seat, eyes burning with mixture of rage and sorrow. He stared at his phone. The recording of Reese's confession felt both validation and threat. He knew what exposing the conversation could do. Demolish Reese's reputation, spark national outrage, force Belmont back into the spotlight. But he also knew it could shatter a boy's future. A boy who'd been manipulated by a father's lies, and a system built to protect them. He looked at Lucille beside him, her face calm yet fierce. She placed a hand on his. You gave him a chance. Shaq nodded. Yeah, but this is far from over. They drove away from the Langdon estate in silence, each lost in thoughts of justice and its price. They reached home just as twilight bled into night. At Serena's door, Shaq paused. He held his breath for a moment, then entered. Serena was awake, eyes open, head tilted toward the window. Shaq knelt beside her as the darkness watched from outside. He didn't speak. He just held her hand. Serena squeezed his fingers. She whispered one word. Papa. Shaq's heart splintered right where it began to heal. He pressed his forehead to hers. I won't let you down. The revelations had begun. The reckoning would follow. And through it all, Shaq, Raina, Serena, and the fragments of truth would walk forward, broken, but together. When the one person who can fix everything disappears, panic turns into purpose. Shaq woke the next morning with a tightness in his chest, as though his heartbeat had shifted into a more urgent rhythm during sleep. Serena's faint whisper of his name last night hovered between them, proof she was waking, but not yet stable. He stepped into the hallway, half expecting to see Raina's silhouette at the top of the stairs. But the corridor was empty, and still save for the hum of the house waking with the day. He found Serena, sitting upright in bed, eyes flicking toward the doorway, searching. Shaq knelt and offered a gentle smile, careful not to alarm her. She had to step out, he said quietly. Serena nodded with uncertainty. Her hand trembled as she reached to touch his. Only later, at breakfast, did Shawnee mention it. She'd gone by the guest room, and nothing stirred. The laptop tray of pens and journals, even the teacup were gone. No note, no trace of her presence, just emptiness. Serena's eyes grew wide, but silent, as if seeing a half-formed nightmare. Shaq's stomach dropped. He sensed something darker at play. Raina didn't just disappear. She was taken, or forced out. And by who? The school? Reese's father? Or someone more sinister? A force determined to crush the voices now awakening. The puzzle snarled around them. He called Nell, who answered with flat silence. Nell described the scene at Raina's safe house. Black-suited men, no badges, armed, who demanded access to her notes and medical records. Nell hid Raina before they found it, and fled with half-burned pages, refusing to share Raina's location, until they regrouped. Nell's voice trembled when she said, they came for her notes, for her records. They said control the narrative, or control the cure. I don't know what that means, but I know she's gone. Shaq's blood pounded. Rebecca turned away, eyes brimming. Serena's shoulders shook. She swallowed hard but didn't cry. She just looked, as if understanding this was bigger than fear. He closed his eyes and drew strength. Tears pooled against his lashes. But then he made a choice. Panic would be weaponized, not abandoned. He reached out to Lucille and Shawnee. Together, they began to map out connections, civil rights attorneys, mental health advocates, journalists with courage, and activist groups Wade had worked with. Serena's first spoken word, Reese, had cracked open more than her silence. It had exposed the machinery built to protect the privileged. Now they would assemble. Lucille dug through her Rolodex of civil rights contacts. Shawnee reached out to trusted media allies. Shaq called a former teammate, now a sheriff in Georgia, requesting discretion. Each call tethered more hope to their anger. Serena sat close, absorbing each step in silence, tears glimmering every time they spoke of Raina. Late afternoon brought a meeting in Shaq's study. Papers strewn across the table, schedules, legal documents, contact lists. Shaq sat across from Nell, eyes steel. They uncovered that Belmont Prep had quietly launched an internal safety committee. After the scandal, Reese's father ensured it included outside consultants, but Nell suspected it had few teeth. The school continued quietly revoking applications from families who spoke out. They traced an unnamed benefactor's connection between the school and a powerful political ally. Key players who could make Raina vanish without legal record. It was more than personal. It was institutional. Serena fidgeted with a pen. Her voice was hushed but assertive. Daddy, her gift, it's a threat to them. She looked up. They're scared she'll break the story wide open. Shaq nodded. They are. And we're going to bring it into the light. Nell cleared her throat. I can't reach Raina until they stop looking. I have to use decoys, change safe houses. I need funds and media attention that doesn't put her at risk. Shaq leaned forward. I'll do both, and I'll make sure they know this family will fight. He looked hard at Serena. She straightened. Do it for Raina. For me. Silence settled, but it felt alive, charged, purposeful. That evening Shaq posted a simple image on social media. A photo of Serena, clutching Raina's blue glass, and the words "Find Raina. Hear her. Protect her gift." It was personal. It was public. It was coded, yet clear. It tagged Raina's anonymous channel, pushing cameras and hearts in her direction. He followed with calls to major media outlets, not for scandal, but for protection, for truth. By midnight articles had begun to surface. Therapy disrupted, miraculous healer missing, millionaire father demands safe return of empathic advocate. They uploaded surveillance stills of black-suited men exiting Raina's hideout. Anonymous sources confirmed office belligerence. Senator Langdon's office issued a press statement. His son's family taking legal action for defamation. Reese himself was silent. Too implicated. Shaq watched Serena, in bed that night. She held that blue glass piece. Raina's presence seemed to hover in its glow. Serena closed her fingers around it, eyes shutting. Shaq knelt, kissed her forehead. We're going to bring her home. Serena's only response was a breath. But in that breath he felt everything. Their vow made flesh. They were now more than a family. They were a movement. Searching. Speaking. Waiting. So when Raina returns, she will come to the roar of voices built by their pain, their love, and their unbreakable refusal to remain silent. Some matriarchs don't raise sons. They raise giants with gentler hands. By midday, the mansion hummed with new purpose. Lucille held court in the dining room, poring over documents, phone pressed against her ear as she navigated legal teams, media contacts, and mental health advocates. Shaq watched her, pride and urgency forged into steel in her bone-deep posture. The fight wasn't just for Serena or Raina. It was for the entire truth, and she bore it without hesitation. Lucille's first call had gone out to civil rights attorney Marvel Harris, a powerhouse known for dismantling institutional cover-ups. In minutes, Harris's assistant confirmed she'd drop everything. Next, Lucille reached media strategist Deshaun Boyd, whose firm specialized in high-stakes social justice campaigns. Every coordinator marked their calendars. Every press release drafted. Every potential legal roadblock anticipated. Shaq sat with Serena in the study as Lucille mapped their plan. Blueprints of media coverage, legal strategy charts, emergency witness protection steps, all lay across the desk. Serena's gaze drifted between her mother, Raina's missing safehouse trace, and the growing list of allies. I won't go public until she's back, Serena said softly. Raina's part of this too. Shaq nodded, his voice urgent but calm. We'll find her. Then you'll speak. Lucille added. Serena's testimony is powerful truth. When the press sees her stepping forward, they'll understand it's not just news, it's redemption. Her Raina, All of them. But none of this happens without Raina standing here too. The fire in Lucille's voice stoked determination deeper in Shaq's veins. He had the skill of a community leader. She had the instinct of a seasoned warrior. And together they forged an unbreakable coalition. Lucille tapped into her decades-long network: activists, pastors, former teachers, local radio hosts, uniting them under a common banner: Line Raina Now. Local churches offered hiding spots, pastors provided moral support, mental health professionals volunteered crisis intervention groups. The mansion's front yard became a temporary command center. Screens displayed live feeds, maps marked searches zones, volunteers handed flyers. Serena watched from the upstairs window, determination growing even in her weakened state. That afternoon, Shaq joined a call with Attorney Harris and Deshaun Boyd. Harris outlined protective legal measures, filing Freedom of Information Act requests to uncover records of the raid, seeking temporary restraining orders to halt destruction of evidence, and preparing for a civil suit against Belmont Prep and others involved in the cover-up. Deshaun outlined a phased media plan, a soft reveal of Serena's gradual recovery, followed by a spotlight interview on her decision to testify, but only after Raina was safe. The parent pilot of the campaign would build empathy rather than sensationalism. Back in the study, Serena cradled Raina's blue glass souvenir. It glimmered faintly, under lamplight. She whispered, "Raina gave me my voice back." Shaq knelt beside her. "We'll bring her home," he repeated. Serena closed her eyes, drawing in shallow breaths. Healing was being built, brick by brick, organized by strategy, powered by love. Outside, Lucille spoke with a prominent editor at a national magazine, convincing him to run a feature story. The story of a father, a daughter, a healer, and the forces trying to silence them. In her calm steel voice, she said, "Not just for clicks, for justice, for healing." He agreed. By evening, the command center glowed under floodlights. Volunteers patrolled. Social media buzzed. Reporters scoped out the neighborhood. Shaq and Lucille stepped outside, side by side for the first coordinated press statement. No shouting, no blame, just hopeful, fierce clarity. Serena's journey had begun. Raina's story would follow. When the statement hit newswires, Serena watched it unfold on CNN. Her fists clenched. She looked at Shaq. "I'm ready to speak for all of us." Shaq nodded, tears glinting. As soon as she's home. The search intensified that night, sparked by the national attention. Tips poured in from shelters across Georgia. One lead took Lucille and a team to a small town 90 miles south. Shaq texted Serena from his car, "Packing shoes, coming soon." She replied, "Bring home my hero." At 2 a.m., Lucille knocked on a steel door behind a thrift store. Inside was Raina, safe, exhausted, wary. She walked out into Lucille's arms, tears flowing. Volunteers cheered. News cameras captured the reunion, as Serena's blue glass was placed gently in Raina's hand. Shaq's body shook, as he embraced them both. Justice felt close now, holding not headlines but human survivors. Inside the mansion, Serena spoke that night before a small circle of allies, her voice raw but steady. "I want to tell them what happened, to me, to Raina. I want them to hear the voices they tried to shut down." Raina held her hand as Lucille watched, fierce pride shining. The alliance stood stronger than ever. Lawyers, journalists, volunteers, survivors, all united. Lucille's fire had ignited something greater than a family. It had sparked a movement, and with Serena ready to stand in the light, and Raina safe and strong, there was nothing left hidden underground. They had justice ahead, and redemption for all who had been silenced. Thanks for your patience. Here's the final installment in this cinematic narrative arc. Justice isn't just a courtroom verdict. Sometimes, it's a girl waking up fully alive. Raina stood at the edge of the courtroom's witness stand, her presence a quiet storm. She wore no makeup, no silk blouse, just a plain gray sweater and a pair of scuffed shoes. Shoes she'd been wearing the day they found her, the day she was taken, the day she came back. Her body was still healing. Her ribs ached when she breathed. Her sleep came in waves. But her voice was unwavering. Shaq sat behind her, one massive hand resting on Serena's shoulder, the other clenched around a folded tissue. His suit was pressed, his tie loose. Lucille sat to the right, her eyes narrowed, both in protection and prayer. Shani and Nell flanked Serena, who held the blue glass piece in her palm, now looped through a silver chain that Raina had returned to her that morning. The courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation. Cameras were banned, but journalists filled every available seat. The national interest had exploded when Serena's statement was released. She had spoken of being buried alive in memory, of being locked in by betrayal, and then she had named names, without hesitation. Reese Langdon, the assistant headmistress, the 3 students who had taunted her, and the adults who turned a blind eye. But it wasn't Serena who gave the fire to the case. It was Raina. When she stepped to the microphone, a hush fell across the courtroom. She didn't begin with rehearsed lines. She didn't cry. She simply said, "I used to sleep on sidewalks because I believed the world had no place for girls like me." And for the next 17 minutes, she told her story, the juvenile facility, the drugs, the silence she had been trained into, the gift she'd grown from pain, how she entered Serena's emotional trauma, like stepping into a haunted house, and how she refused to leave until Serena could come out with her. She spoke with authority, not magic, with pain, not pity, and when she finished, the judge sat back slowly, visibly moved. Outside, Serena held onto Shaq's hand tighter than she had since she was a little girl. "She's not just brave," she whispered. "She's what healing looks like." That afternoon, Belmont Prep issued a statement. The school would shut down for a full academic year. An internal investigation confirmed gross negligence, destruction of evidence, and collusion by administration. A federal probe was launched. Reese Langdon, after weeks of media silence, walked into a separate press room, his father absent. He stood alone, visibly shaken, tearful, and for the first time, spoke not in defense, but confession.
"I should have stopped it. I didn't. And my silence made everything worse."
He resigned from student government, withdrew his Harvard application, and pledged his entire college fund to a mental health organization for racially targeted teens. Some called it reparation. Others called it PR. Shaq called it a first step. Weeks passed. Serena continued speaking, first in whispers, then in speeches. Raina declined every TV interview, instead choosing to speak at closed trauma centers, underground shelters, and with young girls who had been broken in similar ways. Then came the real decision, the one that changed everything. Shaq bought a property on the south edge of Atlanta, a plot that had once been a failed private school. Red brick buildings, a community garden buried under weeds, and enough dorm space to house 30. He called it the Raina Center. Serena helped design the rooms. Raina helped train the staff. Lucille led the community development board. Nell handled veteran support initiatives. And Shaq, he walked every inch of it, making sure every hallway felt safe enough for a child's first step back to hope. The opening was quiet. No red carpet, no celebrity endorsements. Just a circle of survivors, standing beneath an oak tree. Holding hands, Serena spoke for the first time without notes. Her voice was stronger now. Her shoulders no longer curled inward. "Rena showed me that silence isn't a weakness. It's a scar. And every scar means survival. So this place it's for the scarred. Not just to heal, but to speak." The next day, national networks picked up the story. NBA legend builds sanctuary for gifted survivors. From silence to strength, Serena's voice lights the way. Reina's legacy becomes law, as Georgia introduces new protections for empathic therapists and trauma-exposed youth. Inside the center, however, they ignored the headlines. They stayed focused on stories, each child who walked through those doors carrying an invisible weight, and every time Raina greeted one, she knelt to their level, looked them in the eye, and whispered, "You're not alone." Shaq watched her from the window sometimes. He still remembered the first time she appeared in that alley, just a voice, a promise. And now she was rebuilding others with her gift. He turned to Lucille on one of those days and said, "She was never just saving Serena." Lucille smiled. "She was saving all of us." Justice hadn't come in the courtroom. It came every morning, in the sound of a child laughing again, of a girl singing in the hallway, of Serena dancing barefoot in the garden with her eyes open to the sky. And Raina? She still didn't live in the spotlight, but she lived in the awakening. If this story struck something deep, don't let it end at the credits. Share it. Talk about it. Challenge the silence that still exists around power and pain. Some truths don't just deserve to be heard, they demand to be carried forward. Because the next Serena, and the next Raina, might already be waiting for someone to believe them.